Good day, everybody. It is Calxiyn here, and if you guys enjoyed this video, you guys should go ahead and subscribe for more RWBY videos. Check out my Patreon to directly support the channel, and you guys should also follow me on Twitter or join my Discord server if you guys want to talk with me more. So, this is a sad day, you know, and I never thought that I would say that about the RWBY comics, because after, I don't know which one it was, maybe the Maze one, I was digging my heels a little bit, and I wasn't really sure, like, I was procrastinating a lot on reviewing them and discussing them and analyzing them and all that stuff. But then, today, on this very same day, so you guys will probably tell because I'm in the same clothes, I read the Blake one, and I read the Weiss one, and now I read this one, and I'm very sad because this is, like, titled as the epilogue or something, and I think that it's over, and I feel so, like, conflicted because, listen, like, we have dunked on some of the comics. Like, some of the comics have been bad, okay? But a lot of them were okay, and a lot of them were good, but some of them were really great, and I feel like that right when they got into, like, the rhythm of things, you know what I mean? Like, right when they got their, sort of, their shit together, and they finally got, like, comfortable with this world, it was just taken away from them, and they stopped, and I'm a little bit, I'm a little sad that it's over, because the last two chapters were really good, and the art was really consistent, and the writing was really good, and like they had no problems that I could see anyway, you know, the last two that I reviewed today, and so I'm just like finally, you know, everything worked out, but now that it's all worked out, it's all over, like we're not getting any more, so I don't know where, you know, RWBY's future stands with DC. I don't really know if they can do anything, I guess, because, like, the whole point was to show what they were doing in between, you know, where we, like, sort of see characters, like, in, you know, to Volume 5, I guess you could say, because, like, Weiss escaped, and we see that, and, like, Blake's in Menagerie, and, like, you'll see in these pictures, right, that it's sort of setting up, like, where we arrive in Volume 5. Rhyming. Anyway, and so I'm a little sad, because I'm like, but now it's done, and we aren't getting any more, and they were getting it really interesting, and they were getting into the meat of this stuff, and now I'm a little sad. So we're gonna go through, like, themes and stuff, because, you know, I think that this epilogue basically explains, like, what the comic was all about, you know what I mean? And sort of gives us the messages that the comics wanted to send. And so this is interesting, because this is Raven stalking Yang, and all that stuff. So, you know, one headed through the fire. So we have Yang, and then we have one waiting by the water, which is Menagerie. I kind of really like this. Air, fire, water, and then RWBY's Earth, the Avatar. Oh boy. Anyway, and so you guys know what I'm saying. And so it's time to make amends for what I've done. And so I really like this. Like, I really like it. And then Ilya's there. Like, I wish for things. I wish for more, you know? And even though we're apart, I keep thinking of what we've learned and what we have yet to discover. So this is, like, what we've learned time. So I guess this comic for me, like, these chapters, I'm really gonna go through, you know, sort of the themes and the images they show here and sort of decide if the comic did a good job at this. Through stories, no, those stories hold power. The truth will bring you closer to happiness. And so I feel like that with this, you know, this is interesting because that's Ty, that's Crow, and I guess that's Summer. But, you know, again, I guess just a minor thing, like, RWBY wasn't old enough to remember anything about Summer. She looks pretty old in those photos, but anyway, we don't need to focus on sort of that. Like, we've already discussed the continuity of the comics at this point, I don't care, right? And so I feel like that this is more about RWBY's journey. Like, RWBY wanted to be, like, the hero in the fairy tales, but she had to learn that life is not a fairy tale, and I feel like that brings her closer to happiness because that is the reality of the world, and the sooner you accept that reality, the sooner you can sort of move on from the fantasy that you wanted to be in and, you know, live your life in the real world. Does that make sense? So I feel like with RWBY, that sort of makes a lot of sense, right? Because, you know, I feel like that, you know, she may have, like, she had the choice to escape into her fantasy world, but instead she decided to confront reality head on. And I feel like with Yang, it's the exact same sort of thing, is that, you know, the truth will bring her closer to happiness, and that has to do with, you know, losing her arm and stuff like that, and her conversations with the old lady, but it also sort of has to do, you know, with the truth about Raven and all that stuff, is that she can, you know, sort of make up stories about Raven Raven, or she can, like, seek out the truth, and the truth is always better than a lie, you know? And so I really like what they did here with that, because you see, like, Ruby and Yang, and this applies to both of them, because both sisters have their sort of respective escapism, if you want to call it that. Like, I feel like with Yang especially, like, it's sort of double-fold for her, because there's the stuff with Adam, and then there's the stuff with Raven, and the truth, and the power of the truth sort of applies to both. You know, and so, yeah, I think that this is a lesson that the comic sort of went through. Not, like, the biggest lesson that I think of in my head. I think the Weiss and Blake ones were a lot more effective, but yeah. Caring for others can mean meeting them on their own terms. And so, yeah, I do agree with this, especially, like, with the stuff about, like, hey, wanting to take Blake out and, you know, that aspect of the comic. And I think that this was, you know, a good sort of lesson, because it doesn't just apply to Yang trying to meet Blake, but it also is Blake trying to meet other people, you know what I mean? It's hard to explain, but in the other comic, Blake asked for forgiveness, right? And I think what's important is that when you're asking someone for forgiveness, you're not doing it to make yourself feel better, you're doing it, you know, to make the other person feel better, in a sense. And so, you know, Blake wants, I feel like, you know, in a sense, like, we do apologize for ourselves to alleviate our own guilt, and Blake does want to alleviate her own guilt, and that's why she says it's time to, you know, tell you all what I've done and all that stuff. It's time to accept it, and it's time to sort of, you know, like, all of that sort of stuff. And her talking to, again, the lady from the last comic, and sort of, you know, telling her the truth and all of that sort of stuff. Like, I feel like that this is definitely one of those things that definitely applies to both of the girls. And so what I mean about Blake specifically is that that is meeting them on their own terms. Like, she was like, what are your terms to forgive me? Not, here's my apology, you need to accept it now, which is what a lot of people think that's how apologies work. It doesn't, right? You need to address, like, it's for the other person, right? Like, it can be for you a little bit, but it shouldn't be for you the majority of it, right? Like, there's a, you know, there's a reason for all that. And so I feel like with Yang, it sort of applies to meeting Blake halfway and all of that sort of stuff. But with Blake, it's sort of a bigger conversation about the people that she needs to apologize to, which is Callie and Gira and, you know, eventually Yang, but also the other people that she sort of ran into. And so I really like that one. I think that's fine. To solve a problem, you must face it and call it by its name. I feel like that's really, really important when it comes to Adam, right? Is that, you know, to solve the problem, you must face it. Again, I talked about this in my Bumblebee video, which again, hi, I'm Kaylin from the future. I have no idea how well received that video was, if it was well received, you know, if people hated it, I don't know. But I still think that my point is still valid, that Blake's arc is very, you know, it's very good, because it's sort of like she used to run away and then she confronts her fear. And in the comic, it's sort of more drawn out where, you know, Blake has run away twice, right? She ran away to Beacon to escape Adam, and then she ran away to Menagerie, but then through Menagerie, slowly she starts confronting. She goes to her parents, she, you know, talks to the lady and asks for forgiveness. You know what I mean? Like, instead of running away, she starts to slowly confront her fears, and the biggest fear is Adam, and defeating it is a representation of Blake's, like, stopping running and starting to, you know, call the problem for what it is, and that problem, you know, starts with Adam, right, and, like, his abuse, and accepting that, and then also sort of going forward and confronting that. Like, I feel like that's the whole point of Blake's arc, and, you know, again, in theory, I think it's a really good character arc for her. In execution, at some points, like, it's a little, like, wonky, if you want to call it that, but I think that, you know, the comic really helped sort of, you know, give it, like, stepping stones instead of this big leap. Like, suddenly Blake runs away, and then suddenly she comes back, right? Like, you see the little steps Blake takes in order to start confronting and stop running, right? And so I feel like that this is really good. I feel like the comic really, I feel like out of everyone, right, Blake and Yang needed this the most, like, needed the comic the most out of all other characters, right? Because I feel like Weiss is already very well written. You know, RWBY, like, sometimes people debate about her, like, should she have this, should she have that, like, is it fine for her to be a static character, like, does she need change, like, everybody sort of debates, but I feel like the people that needed this the most, because the most attention should have been on sort of giving Blake this sort of stuff, and then Yang. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that they didn't necessarily divide their time as effectively between RWBY, Weiss, Blake, and Yang during Volume 4, and that the Blake parts of this comic really, really help her, and we see her journey, and it's very compelling in the comic, whereas in the show sometimes it's a little bit, like, funky. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like that all of this, like, all of the stuff that we've learned about Blake in the comic is very, very effective. So for this, adulthood is learning to take responsibility for your actions, their motives, and their unforeseen consequences. So I feel like this is really interesting that Ozpin is saying this, considering what we know about Ozpin, right? But I feel like this is especially true for Weiss, right? You know, because I guess unforeseen consequences, right? Like, even though Weiss means well sometimes, like, there are consequences for actions, but I feel like that this isn't necessarily directed to Weiss. Like, I feel like it kind of is, right? You know, like, she learned from her actions, more like Volume 1 to 3. Like, I feel like in 4, you know, she doesn't really do anything wrong, if that makes sense for Weiss. But I feel like this is more about what Weiss has learned about her mother, is that, you know, her actions, her motives, and the unforeseen consequences of Willow's actions are sort of, like, resulting in what happened. Does that make sense? Like, this lesson is less about Weiss and more about the adults in Weiss's life. But Weiss is learning that she can escape the cycle, because she says, I don't want to be like you. Like, she says that to Willow, right? So this is the lesson that Jacques and Willow both lack, right? And so, you know, to make sure that Weiss doesn't turn out that way, she is listening to this. Does that make sense? Because I feel like that's very, very important, is that, again, I don't think in Volume 4 Weiss did anything wrong, but I think that this lesson is applied to her story because she needs to learn this in order to break the cycle of abuse. Even if she hasn't done anything that would prompt learning this, we don't need to do something bad to learn how to do something good. We can learn how to do the good thing first as a preventative measure, and I feel like that this is what that lesson is. So I feel like that's really good. Then we have the town, which I guess this is the village that somebody saved one time. Growth only comes with change. Yeah, I guess this is like, yeah, I mean, I'd hope so. I don't know who this is referring to exactly. I guess all the characters, right? But yeah, that's true. I don't really have a lot to say about that one. This was fucking hilarious. I'm like, what the hell is this lady doing? This is obviously Yang's lesson. You have a right to your anger and trauma, but not the right to surrender the battle against yourself. I feel like that this doesn't only apply to Yang, though. I feel like this very much applies to Willow and Blake as well, because she has trauma. I don't know if Blake has anger, but she has trauma, right? And so I feel like the same thing with Willow, right? And so Willow has surrendered the battle against herself, right? Or at least maybe she doesn't. We'll see the ending panels and what, like, Willow starts to do. Obviously, this is more directed at Yang, but I think this is also a really good thing, again, for Willow, in that, like, Weiss's whole story. And, like, Weiss also has a right to her trauma. Like, Weiss has trauma, but she did not surrender. That is, like, the whole point. And so I really like how these lessons apply to more than one character. Hello. Okay. Oh boy. So this is the Faunus lady that was in the story about the woman who killed herself because her husband died in battle. Remember? Because of the ring? And Blake has the ring now. So I was like, oh boy, character design, like the silver hair and and like the bangs and the horns, like, oh my god, have I ever been attracted to a 2D object? Like, anyway, and so this is the whole thing. The past is a guide and not a punishment. I don't really get that one. I guess it's like, I think that this applies to Blake a lot. Like, you know, you don't need to be punished by what happened in the past. You know, because, like, Blake wasn't necessarily the one, like, murdering everybody. Like, that was kind of Adam, you know what I mean? Like, the past is a guide for how you should change in the future. It's not there to constantly punish you and remind you of your faults. It's there so you can learn from those faults. Does that make sense? Like, you guys know, like, when you go to bed and you lie awake at night and you think of every, like, embarrassing, cringy thing you've ever done or said. Like, that happens to me a lot. And it's like, well, the past isn't to punish you. And you don't think about, I don't know the psychological reason why we think that, right? I don't know. But I think it's just a human thing so you don't make the same mistake. Like, I'm sure if we were back in the times of, like, hunting and stuff, like, that would be a sort of a memory related, like, reinforcer, like, hey, don't do that again because it could be, like, dangerous, you know. But instead, like, because our brains, you know, and we're in a modern time, it's like, okay, well, we're gonna apply this to the cringy thing that you did in 7th grade instead of, like, you know, tripping while you were hunting an animal or something like that. You guys understand? I don't know how it works, but that's sort of, like, the logic that I'm putting behind it. I think that that's sort of why we sort of review the past and sort of mentally review situations where we feel like we're in danger, and the danger of our time is being embarrassed and humiliated, you know? And so that's what I sort of think of. Like, I don't remember those things that night because I want to punish myself. I remember those things so I know not to do them again. Anyway, I just really love this girl. Wow, what a design. And so the Schnee Manor, so this is really interesting, right? Being the victim of cycles of abuse doesn't excuse you from fighting to break those circles. And so that applies to Blake, because Blake, you know, was a victim and she broke the cycle, and now that applies to Willow sort of as well. And Willow, you'll see another panel where she actually starts to do that. The maze, I don't like this lesson. The way out is always through. Like, I guess, but they also told Yang not to do that, and I mentioned that in another comic, and I don't think that video has been uploaded yet, so if you have a point, like, contrasting to mine, and I end up agreeing with it, like, you know what I mean, like, that video isn't out, so I didn't get people's opinions on the maze situation yet, but yeah, I still don't like that one. Sorry! Lessons are only words unless they are made into action. I agree. I mean, I feel like that's with all the girls. All of these, here are the lessons that you should have learned throughout the comic, and these are the lessons the characters learn. They only matter if they are actually put to action, and then they have the boat guy, obviously. And then, so this is the forest. Your legacy will be defined by what you have, by what you do within the time you have. Sorry, guys, I don't know why I cannot read today. But yeah, so I feel like that's a little dark. Are they gonna kill this lady? I hope not. But I feel like that they're showing this lady specifically, you know, because of all the stuff with Blake. Your legacy will be defined by the stuff, by what you do with the time that you have. It sort of echoes back to the fact that that guy was not a good person, like her brother or whatever. Like, he was not a good person within the time that he had on this earth, right? Meanwhile, Blake has sort of changed to be a good person with the time that she has been given, and that's why, like, she doesn't, like, murder her and all that stuff, like, for the brothers, like, revenge and all that. And so I feel like that's really good. Also, wait a second, do these have letters? Yeah, they do have letters, so I guess we can see which lesson is supposed to be applied to which character. I mean, I still think that they apply to all of them. Yeah, if you guys are looking back, they all have little letters to help you guys figure out which lesson is whose, I guess, or maybe who's actually saying the line. That could be it too. Willow, you will open this door right now if you know what's good for you, wife. Okay, I mean, yeah, so this is where I see, like, this is where Willow starts to change. What is right must be placed above comfort and validation. And so I feel like this is really interesting because this is the start of Willow changing, maybe. And so this is why we see the Willow that we see in Volume 7. I thought that this was really interesting. And so, yeah, I really like that one. And so, then we have, when will we find each other again? So that's RWBY, sort of wondering. Every other question I have, my mother, Raven Branwyn, is going to answer. See, that would have been nice in theory, but did that happen in practice? Anyway, you guys already have seen my Bumblebee video. I don't need to do it again. Let me find the strength to stay. Let me find the strength to speak. I really like this. Like, Blake will not be silenced by Adam, and she won't run away in fear anymore. Like, I feel like Blake's arc, again, is one of the best in the entire comic. With the Yang stuff, it's sort of hit or miss for me still. But yeah, I feel like that Blake definitely has sort of the strongest character arc with all the comic stuff they gave her, like, out of the three. Like, I still feel like if this comic stuff was included in the show, I think that I would still have Weiss, Blake, RWBY, and then Yang, just because of some of the stuff that has to do with Raven. Like, it's sort of weird to see, like, all the questions I have, Raven is gonna answer, and then she really did not, right? You know, there were not a lot of answers given or a lot of questions asked. I mean, there were questions fast, but they were, you guys know what I mean, right? Like, I don't know, it's just, it wasn't necessarily to the extent, like, people thought that Yang would confront Raven. Does that make sense? Like, obviously, she asked questions, she got some answers, but it wasn't to the extent that a lot of people wanted to see, and so it's just awkward seeing this, like, I'm gonna, you know, I have lots of questions, and Raven's gonna answer them all, right? And then we see the show end. Right? And so I feel like that, if we took everything from the comic, and it's unfortunate because Yang doesn't actually talk to Raven in the comic, so that isn't fleshed out, right? But I feel like that Blake's, if we're taking all the comic stuff, it's definitely like Weiss, Blake, RWBY, Yang, instead of how I would rank it now, ignoring the comic, which is Weiss, RWBY, Blake, and Yang, I think. Like, if I had to rank, like, their character arcs and, like, how much I like them and how good I think they are and sort of stuff like that. And so I really like this. I will do better, be better, and have faith that wherever my team is, so will they. I think that that's really nice. I think that that's nice. What the fuck is this book, though, okay? Is this ever gonna come back in the show, like the code book from Ozpin? Like, if the comics aren't continuing, this wasn't a thing in the show. Like, are we just never gonna know what secret code was there? I don't know. I wanna tweet, like, somebody. I don't know. I wanna tweet out and see if I can get an answer about that, because if the comics are ending, we'll never know what the code was, right? You know? And that worries me. Hello, Raven! Like, just, you know, chilling in the back like that, but anyway, and so, I like that. We'll come back, we'll go on soon, and then that's it. That's the end. So, yeah, guys. And so, yeah, I really liked the comic. I really liked this one. I'm very sad that it's all over, because again, like I said, I think that the comics were really getting better and really adding something that we all needed. But unfortunately, it seems like there aren't gonna be any more, and I get it, but like, what if, I don't know, what if instead of, like, I don't know if they should do this, but like, what if we get one for Volume 5? I guess that would be admitting that something is really wrong with Volume 5, right? Like, if they did a Volume 5 comic as well, but maybe that would help flesh out some of the character stuff. But then again, some people won't care because they'll be like, well, this isn't canon, this wasn't in the show, you know? So I don't know what the solution is, because I'm like, I feel like that this gave Blake, like, this made me like Blake a lot more than I like Blake, right? But the problems in the show are the problems with the show, and I feel like that none of those problems are gonna change until we get, like, a RWBY, like, remind. I said that before, a RWBY Kingdom Hearts 3 remind, but for RWBY, right? And so, yeah, I don't know, it's sort of bittersweet, because I'm like, I really want to see them expand. Like, I feel like that what would be really nice is to do all of RWBY in novelization form, if that makes sense. Is that a word? Like, you know, comic form, novel form, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, I feel like, you know, RWBY Volume 1, the book. RWBY Volume 2, the book. RWBY Volume 3, the book. So on and so on and so on, and then those books could sort of be the definitive version for a lot of fans. Does that make sense? And maybe one day RWBY will, like, get remade in some areas, you know? Because I'm just saying, like, all of this detail is so good, it deserves to be a part of the show, and I understand why it can't be, because we're past that, and we can't sort of dwell on those past things, but it would be nice if sometime there was sort of that definitive, like, because I feel like the comics are nice, but I feel like the comics aren't even going to continue after this, and so a better idea would be, like, we already have a book series where they talk about Coco, and they talk about Team Sun, and all that stuff, and hopefully that stuff, like, makes it into the show, so maybe, like, RWBY deserves, like, a book series. I don't know. I don't know the solution to all of these things, because, like, you can't go back and add this stuff in the volumes it was supposed to be. This is supposed to be the supplement for that, but also what has happened in past volumes is also influencing volumes, like the problems that I have with Volume 7, and so it's just really difficult. But yeah, again, I really, really enjoyed the comics. I'm really sad that they're done. I'm really sad that it's all over. But yeah, I don't know what we're gonna do now. The RWBY manga, I guess. Yeah, I need to do some of those. I have the Yang, why did I start with Yang? I have the Weiss, Blake, and Yang ones, and I read the Weiss one, and Hunter and I made a review in June of 2019, and we didn't record it, or upload it, or do anything like that. So yeah, I think that after the comics, my next project is definitely gonna be doing the manga. because, you know, I've been sort of interchanging, like, I've been like, RWBY theory, comic, RWBY theory, comic, RWBY theory, comic, and now that the comics are over, it's probably gonna be more like RWBY theory, manga, RWBY theory, manga, RWBY theory, the book came out, right? Hopefully something like that. So yeah, those are my thoughts. It's just all very complicated, you know, and I guess I will see you guys in the next one of whatever it is. Let me know what you guys thought of the comic series as a whole, because I guess it's all over. And yeah, I will see you guys later. Bye.